Welcome to today's webinar, Modernizing Data, Building a Foundation for Smarter Decisions. My name is Sean McManus. I've been with Netrix for almost 10 years, and I'm now representing the Modern Apps and Data Department here in our office of the CTO. I'm here today with my colleague, Tom Lilly. Tom, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yep. Thanks, Sean. Like Sean, I've been here for just under 10 years at this point. I am also in our office of the CTO, and I focus on cloud solutions, primarily infrastructure. And with Sean today, going to be talking a little bit about data. So, Sean,
Thanks, Tom.
Let's go through it.
So the agenda for today, we're going to talk through our objectives and then head right into the challenges of legacy data. Then we'll pair that with the case for the cloud, why the cloud alleviates those challenges. And then the next two sections, we're going to talk about your internal company, how we can eliminate barriers and what you can do right now to start preparing for a migration. And then we'll finish up with some next steps that you can take. So first of all, we're going to identify why cloud data platforms are the best approach for a modern data estate modernization. And hopefully we'll provide you guys with the motivation and the first steps needed to develop such a modernization plan. So legacy data challenges. Legacy data estates present numerous challenges that impact our organizations. These systems are often slow, inefficient, and costly to maintain. Their inflexibility and inability to integrate with modern technologies lead to data silos, which makes information difficult to access. Consequently, organizations struggle to harness the full potential of their data, resulting in lost opportunities for innovation and growth. We'll discuss each of these challenges in more detail in the coming slides. First challenge has to deal with scalability and elasticity. On-prem systems are just inherently rigid. When the data volumes grow or processing demands spike, adding more hardware, think servers and storage, it's a time-consuming and expensive process that often requires significant upfront capital investment. Conversely, once demand decreases, you're stuck with underutilized and costly hardware. The result of this is that the on-prem platforms can't automatically scale resources up or down in real time to match your fluctuating workloads. This leads to wasting resources by over-provisioning or the performance bottlenecks that come with under-provisioned resources. Next, the high cost and resource strain. Legacy systems demand significant upfront capital expenditures. The purchasing and setting up of hardware, the managing and acquiring of software license, and the physical infrastructure requires a significant initial investment. These investments also require ongoing operational costs. Think about the power, the cooling, physical space, maintenance, not to mention the salaries of all the specialized staff that you need to manage and troubleshoot those systems. Thirdly, managing hardware depreciation and obsolescence demands regular, costly upgrades and replacements to keep up with the technological advancements, as the on-prem hardware has a limited lifespan. Therefore, legacy systems incur a disproportionate management effort. A large percentage of IT resources is often dedicated to maintaining and engineering the existing infrastructure. This leaves less time for strategic data initiatives and innovation. Tom?
Yeah, and all that really feeds into what we really see as performance restrictions and issues just really with platform agility and having that sort of rigid foundation. As Sean mentioned, having to set up new hardware, having to procure new hardware means that you want to get the most out of that for the longest time possible, because you don't want to have to go back to your procurement team to get another server, or to buy more storage, or to upgrade your RAM, or things along those lines. And that can lead to performance bottlenecks. As we get into these data estates and data platforms on premises, they just tend to grow and grow and grow and grow. And a lot of times the hardware doesn't keep up with it. If you're a traditional organization, you may have a 3 to 5 year to 7 year refresh cycle on your hardware, which means that as your data estate grows, as your queries become more complex, as your views and data visualizations become more complex, that your hardware just isn't keeping up unless you've really laid a lot of money out in the beginning to make sure that everything is going to be set up and is going to be future proof. So because of that, we see a lot of performance bottlenecks as your environment matures and as your environment grows. And that also reduces the ability to get into cutting edge analytics. Because once again, you're on these platforms for 3, 5, 7, sometimes even longer years. You may be running older hardware that isn't as compatible with some newer capabilities and newer functions. Maybe you don't have the ability to implement some newer data gateways or data visualization solutions because of the database solution or the data lake solution that you're leveraging. That's going to kind of limit yourselves as an organization, especially when we get into some discussions later around like real-time analytics and real-time dashboarding, just because you don't have the hardware that can keep up with it. It does also tend to mean that your deployment innovation does slow down. As we start talking about a cloud-centric world here in a handful of slides, we're going to talk about things like CI/CD pipelines and how you can better take advantage of cloud solutions and be more agile as you're going into the cloud. And once again, when you're looking at on-premises, you don't necessarily have the same set of tools. Sure, you can use things like Terraform or GitHub or things along those lines to do your deployments and get into things like data ops and ML ops. But we don't see a lot of our customers doing that as part of their deployments on premises. They're really coupling that with their cloud environment and with their migration and utilization of cloud resources. And then finally, we talk about monolithic architectures. If you're unfamiliar with it, a monolithic architecture is essentially one big application that acts as a single entity that doesn't really have resources broken out. So if you have data pipelines, and you have your database, and you have your web front end, and you've got your analytics, all those are sort of housed in a single entity that's managed as a single entity. And then what that essentially means is that if you need to upgrade one portion of the application, you need to upgrade everything. That way, if somebody breaks something or there is an issue with that longer term, it's a lot more onerous on the organization to make those updates. And we see a lot of our customers working in these monolithic architectures, especially when it comes on premises. Because once again, they've got the hardware, they want to use it to the best ability that they can. And that's the way that it was always done. And they're not really looking to change that mentality unless we have a major event happen, like migration to the cloud. And talking about major events, one of the other major events that we see is security issues. When you're on premises, you've got a lot of things to keep in mind, not only around the patching of your servers, maintaining service packs, maintaining your middleware, maintaining access into those servers, as well as your middle tiers, your application data visualization, web tiers, et cetera. But you also have physical security. Whether that is in a data center, whether you've offloaded that to a colocation facility, whether you're a smaller organization that just has a server closet. At the end of the day, you need to worry about things like physical security, application security, network security, web security, authentication, authorization, et cetera. And a lot of times when you're building your applications, you need to build those in yourself. We're getting a little bit better, especially as we talk about some capabilities here coming up, where that integration does become simpler, but it's still something that you have to deal with and monitor, maintain, and eventually modernize, hopefully. I talked a little bit about patching and updates. I don't know anybody that we work with. I don't know any of my clients that likes patching servers. And that could be operating system patches. It could be SQL Server patches, could be Linux packages, depending on what your infrastructure looks like. Nobody wants to do it. And myself included. It's one of my least favorite topics to talk about, but it's a necessary evil when we're talking about virtual machines. We're talking about servers. We're talking about all this middleware. And we want to make sure that everything is up to date, but we also need to make sure that when we do updates, it doesn't break anything. I can tell you how many times, or can't tell you how many times, I've installed a SQL Service Pack and had to roll it back because it broke something business critical. It is just nobody's cup of tea. Nobody likes doing it, but once again, we all have to. Compliance as well. having a compliance benchmark, whether it's around identity, access, network security, et cetera, especially for those organizations that are under specific controls like HIPAA or GDPR or PCI DSS. There are some very rigid compliance requirements to make sure that your data is in compliance. And also getting back into some of the security requirements too, that becomes a lot more difficult when you have to maintain everything yourself. You have to produce your own attestations of compliance. You have to work with your own auditors to make sure that your data center is secured. And at the end of the day, you need to make sure that everybody is doing their job properly. There's a lot of human error that goes into things like patching servers and making sure that the application is still up and ensuring that as you're doing these updates that things don't break. The human element is probably the hardest part of IT, and people talk about getting computers to do what they want to do, or getting this data visualization to work properly, or figuring out the database schemas that I want to set up for this for this relational database. Really, it comes down to the human part, because we make so many mistakes and we don't want to fess up to them. We are people at the end of the day. But the more that we can shift some of these things into pipelines and into automation, and really shift left a lot of these things, and leverage native cloud capabilities, reduces the possibility of having human error, whether that is on the base configuration side, whether it's on the security configuration side, or whether that's just maintaining the environment in general. The goal there is to reduce that human error wherever possible. And then finally, as we look at our legacy systems, we traditionally have these data silos. I can't tell you how many data centers I walk into and how many clients that I specifically walk into that they've got 15 different teams with 15 different databases that could all really benefit from talking to each other, but nobody wants to, because they don't have a unified data warehouse. They don't have a unified data lake. The legacy solutions just don't have this capability to export or import data. Nobody's looking at unifying schemas. Nobody's looking at having any sort of capability to make these decisions across business units and across, make these cross-functional decisions. And those data silos are causing inefficiencies. They're causing issues. They're causing the business to make poor decisions. And that comes into data compatibility as well, that nobody's looking to normalize this data across business units, or across portfolio companies, across applications, even within the same business unit. Those are some major issues that we see. And then finally, obviously, disaster recovery. What happens if your primary data center goes down? Do you really want to mirror terabytes and terabytes, or even petabytes of data to another data center, and pay for some of those line fees, pay for the extra storage, pay for the extra compute, to be able to host that data, so that you can make these decisions if your primary environment goes down? These are all major things that we see when we talk to our clients about their data estates on premises, because it really is tough to get out of that legacy hardware mindset and talk about, why things should go into the cloud, which we do want to get into next. But, Shean, I know I've been talking for a few minutes. Anything on these last few slides, or any other challenges or points of clarification that you think we want to talk about before we talk about why cloud and what it really can do for us?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I like to go back to the security slide. And when we talk about security, a lot of times the concerns with clients are they don't want their data exposed outside of their own on-prem network. And so they're looking at security from a standpoint of the cloud being a potentially more dangerous or risky place for their data. When, as we'll talk about later, that's often the opposite. There's often a lot of things on-prem that come up with regard to patches and vulnerabilities and having to stay on top of all that. And the legacy, or the cloud providers, are doing a great job right now addressing all of these specific concerns that companies have with data in the cloud, to the point where you can make the argument that having your data there is actually a more secure place long term. So I think that's sort of an interesting thing that we'll touch on coming up.
Yeah, and that's a great call out. And not to put any spoilers out for later in the slides, but when we look at these hyperscalers, they're spending billions or even tens of billions of dollars on security. I can count on probably one hand the number of my clients that have that as their security budget. And that's because they specifically need to have it that way. So I'm absolutely with you, Sean, that is a great call out and something that, I certainly contend with and speaking to my clients a lot. So with that, let's talk about why moving to the cloud makes sense and what this can look like and some of the benefits of doing so. And really, a lot of these slides that we're going to talk about are going to come back to this one singular point, and that is scalability and elasticity. As Sean mentioned in the previous section, one of the biggest things that we see and we talk to our clients about is capital expenditure and hardware life cycle. To say, hey, by the way, I need to plan for 10% or 15% of data growth over the next 7 years because that's my hardware lifecycle policy, and that's when I'm going to be, buying my next rack of servers. It's where I'm going to be buying my next tray of disks. But until then, we just don't have it in the budget. Therefore, we need to be able to plan for that from the beginning. The nice thing about moving into the cloud is you can scale your environment dynamically, and that also includes scaling it down to 0 if it's not being used. So for example, if I have a database front end that only gets updates or maybe only receives updates once a day from a batch processing job, I can scale that entire environment down to 0 minus the data storage and not have to pay for it. During those batch processing jobs, I can dynamically allocate dozens or even hundreds of cores, and terabytes or even petabytes of storage temporarily to make sure that these jobs run and complete in a proper amount of time, and then scale all that back down. So now I don't necessarily need to worry about making this giant purchase up front. I don't need to worry about going to my procurement team and saying, hey, by the way, I need tens of millions of dollars for this hardware that we are just going to have to replace in a handful of years, or we're going to have to upgrade because all these new things around AI are causing a lot more utilization of our CPUs or GPUs. Maybe there's a chip shortage, like a lot of us probably dealt with a handful of years ago. We don't necessarily need to worry about that with our dynamic scaling capabilities of the cloud. And that goes not only into the data storage side, but also into things like ETL. It goes into things like data visualization, where I can ensure that the proper people have that access without having to scale up a web server to support the traffic, or to have to scale up my worker nodes or SSIS servers to be able to perform these packages or execute these packages. It's all done for me automatically, that whatever is necessary for my environment is made available, and then I can just throw it away later and not have to really worry about it. At the same time, one of the other major things that we hear of as well, I also don't want to break the bank, because at the end of the day, these are variable costs. That 1 month I may have a cost of $10,000 and the next month is $10 million. That's one of the major concerns that I hear from a lot of my clients. Those of you that are familiar with the well-architected framework for cloud solutions are probably familiar with the cost pillar, which is everybody's favorite pillar, apparently. But one of the things to understand is that we can actually reduce your capital expenditures. Remember, you're not buying this hardware on premises. You're not having to go into a co-location facility and buy another rack. Those CapExes are gone and they're being replaced by these operational expenditures. And as part of those operational expenditures, you're actually lowering your overall costs. Sean mentioned, having to hire people to run your top of rack switching and your data center in general and replace disks and do all this work. We can actually train those individuals to be more efficient to work in cloud solutions because they don't need to worry about that day-to-day effort of doing all those low-level tasks. So that actually overall reduces your operational costs when it goes to managing these cloud-based environments. And at the end of the day, we can optimize things better. We don't have to have all these servers with 20% of headroom in them because of the 1 day a year that you need to burst your servers to be able to support end of month. Or we don't need to have this 30% extra cap space because you're expecting to grow into it over the next 10 to 15 years. As we said on the last slide, you can scale and grow and ensure that everything in that environment is tailored to you and your environment and is scaled appropriately as you need it, whether that's up or down. So as we can see, we have a lot of capabilities around cost control and really around operationalizing and right-sizing your environment. And that obviously has a major impact on the performance and capabilities of your environment too, as you know, modernize your data estate. Which I'm going to turn it back over to Sean to talk a little bit about performance and our agility. So, John, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So cloud performances or cloud platforms also enhance performances and operational agility. While on-prem systems do a really good job offering low latency, cloud platforms can optimize that latency with proper data ingestion and transformation. And the additional use of global content delivery networks that these platforms have strategically distribute the content across geographically diverse servers. So what that means is you have a company that's global or national, but you have your data center in one place. There's replication that occurs all across the country, so that no matter where you're accessing your data, if you're in an office in Minnesota and you need to access a data center that on-prem would be in Miami or Atlanta, now you're going to be through the cloud, you're going to be accessing that much more locally. It's going to be much quicker. Your performance is going to be much better. Secondly, the cloud environments offer a rapidly expanding feature set. So if you want to stand up on-prem, if you want to stand up a server to be able to do some machine learning or set up AI capabilities, it may be really difficult. It may be next to impossible. You may have to have additional hardware procurement. By using a cloud platform, these tools are built in. You just have to utilize them and pay the extra compute. So you're already ahead of the game. The barriers to entry into those particular services is much lower, and the operational costs, while additionally incremental, are going to make up for it for themselves by the reduced fixed costs of setting up all those additional services. Thirdly, cloud platforms enable rapid prototyping and experimentation, allowing businesses to quickly test new ideas and iterate on new solutions, deploy new features, all of that stuff. You can do all of those things much more quickly. You're trying something out, proof of concept. You don't need new hardware. You don't need new software licenses. You don't need all of those things to be able to stand up, a new solution. And finally, that all encourages the adoption of scalable microservices architecture. So you don't have that rigid monolithic design that an on-prem system has, but you have a flexible platform that allows you to build and modify and grow as your needs change. So security, we mentioned security before. That's a big thing. Today's cloud providers implement that enterprise level security measures and advanced technologies that are the kind of things that are just cost prohibitive to run locally. Tom mentioned he's got a handful of clients that have the budget to be able to do those things, but these cloud platforms, that's their business. They handle all the software updates, all the security patches, all the known exploits, and they operate with a shared responsibility model where the provider manages all of that underlying infrastructure, and that reduces your burden to have to manage that yourselves. Secondly, you can also utilize a hybrid cloud environment. And this allows organizations that may have very sensitive or regulated data, keep that data on-prem, but leverage the public cloud for your less sensitive workloads. That helps you meet these stringent requirements, HIPAA, GDPR, that sort of thing. Cloud providers have those built-in security features that can help reduce those compliance costs, obviously, compared to maintaining an on-prem infrastructure. We've talked about that many times. Finally, especially in hybrid models, the cloud solutions offer centralized management tools that help you apply those consistent policies, help you track data usage, data lineage, and ensure data quality across all of those diverse environments. This is something that really speaks to addressing data silos and your inconsistent data quality that might evolve over time on an on-prem system. And finally, here on the case for the cloud, simplifying data management. I mean, that is absolutely huge. Hybrid cloud environments facilitate seamless data integration between cloud and on-prem. So if you have to go that route, you can break down those silos and provide a unified view for better decision-making ability. Additionally, the distributed hybrid infrastructure offers interoperability with your in existing IT infrastructure, allowing organizations to integrate legacy applications without a complete overhaul. So where we often see this in clients is they have their data on-prem and they have that system that's running, and they don't necessarily want to take that full step of bringing that entire ERP system to the cloud, but they want the data for reporting. So we set up data gateways, and we were able to ingest that data into a cloud platform, and along with other data that may be coming from existing cloud systems that they might have, we might be able to use unstructured data in the form of like Excel spreadsheets, and all of that data can get collated, put together, and reported on in a single set of dashboards. And that kind of a solution would be just near impossible if you're trying to do all of that on-prem. Finally, cloud platforms come with automatic failover mechanisms and improved DR. So you don't have to worry about that. It just works. If they have a server node that goes down, they have a backup server node that spins right up. You don't have to concern yourself with all of those manually expensive DR practices that are implemented when you're having to set up your on-prem system. So we've established all of these challenges with existing legacy on-prem data platforms, and we've talked about how modernizing with cloud computing can alleviate those challenges. Next set of the slides here, we're going to talk about how do we eliminate those barriers that may be keeping your organization from moving forward. So the first barrier I often see is clients lack a general clear strategy. Thanks, Tom. Or they're underestimating the scope of the project. So they get into this feedback loop of analysis by paralysis where they keep talking about it and then they don't really know how to get started. So what we recommend is have our clients address this barrier by, defining clear objectives. Establish that roadmap and really set yourself up with realistic timelines. Don't expect to undertake this entire thing all in a 6-month period or a year period if you've got a really large system. Prioritize those systems, and you can do it piecemeal. You don't have to do it all at the same time. And finally, define your KPIs and integrate all of those within your overall business goals. That way you're aligned. Your project of data modernization is aligned with the rest of the company. Next, ROI. And I really think this is the big piece here. Make sure that you're making the financial case for this. Determine that ROI calculation. It's critically important. If you want to take this to management and get management buy-in, you have to make the case that this solution down the road is going to save you money. So be very specific. Quantify what you're spending things on now, what your projected expenses are in the future. Make sure you're involving those key stakeholders. Get management buy-in from that. Highlight where risk mitigation needs to take place, and definitely think about the opportunity costs. So that's one thing that's maybe more difficult to quantify, but if you're spending money on-prem, that means you don't have that budget to maybe spend on AI or machine learning. And if your business is going to grow based on decision-making on AI, machine learning, like that's going to hold you back if you're not able to invest in those particular areas. So what I often say is like having a great ROI calculation is just going to grease the wheels for the whole project. It's going to put everybody in a line. It's going to make the businesses and the leadership very excited about pursuing this type of a project. I think, Tom, we're back to you now, or is this one mine? Oh, this one's mine too. Okay.
Go for it.
Go for it. The on-prem legacy data set has often been built up over years. So you've got these complex architecture and integration points. And so that complexity is often another thing that leads people to sort of avoid going forward with this type of a project or kicking the can down the road is you just don't really know where to start. So what we recommend is conduct a thorough infrastructure assessment to identify where all of these compatibility points are and where the potential compatibility concerns arise. Plan your migration in phases so to minimize disruption. Clean and profile your data before you transfer. Plan for very cloud-specific data transfer services for large volumes. There's tools out there that can help with that. And leverage the automation integration platform services for seamless integration. There's plenty of services out there and people that can help you get from point A to point B without having to do all of that work yourselves.
Now I think it's me.
Now it's
All right.
Tom's turn. Yes.
All
Your
right.
favorite topic.
All right. Yeah. Let's talk about security and compliance. Obviously, it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart for anybody who's talked to me before, or may have figured that out from my previous discussion on security and compliance. When we talk about data security and data governance, I think one of the biggest things is encryption. Cloud platforms themselves obviously have multiple layers of encryption before you're even presented with the ability to be able to put data into the cloud. But these systems and solutions also allow you to bring your own encryption keys. So, if you're really that paranoid about your data, making sure that you're bringing your own encryption keys, making sure that everything is encrypted, not only at rest, but also in transit is also important. The nice thing about these cloud providers is a lot of times they actually will allow you to turn or to pull a lever and disable the ability to not be able to do end-to-end encryption. For example, I know that most or both major cloud providers, you can turn off the ability to do insecure transfer to S3 storage buckets or to storage accounts. And that is secure by design and secure by default. Not to mention the other layers of encryption that you can then layer on top of it with yourselves. Whether you want to bring your own keys or use platform managed keys, things along those lines. That being said, it is also imperative that you regularly conduct risk assessments and look at compliance. As Sean mentioned earlier, security and compliance in the cloud is a shared responsibility model. These hyperscalers are taking care of that physical infrastructure, taking care of some of that underlying patching. But for you as an organization to put your data up there, to put your applications out there, you still have to maintain some level of security for those because they're still going to be potentially exposed at the edge, could potentially still have sensitive data in them. So make sure that you are evaluating the risk of those environments. Do regular penetration testing. One of the things that a lot of my customers do on-prem is they do pen testing, but they forget that they can also do it against their cloud environment, or they put their cloud environment out of scope because the cloud provider is handling that, which again isn't always going to be the case. So make sure that you're assessing those environments, making sure that you're keeping up with compliance certifications. As you go through your audits, make sure you're grabbing the latest attestations of compliance from your cloud providers and giving those to your governance, risk, and compliance teams. They will appreciate having some of their work done for them as you provide them with that some ready-built content. The other thing that I recommend as well is using what's called CSPM or Cloud Security Posture Management tools. So if you're really concerned about how your cloud environment is configured, having these CSPM tools ensures that you have this window, you have this visibility, you've got this dashboard saying, hey, by the way, you've got this open S3 bucket. Hey, you've got this machine exposed at the edge. Hey, this is not configured per best practices. And even drilling down into CSPM into a subset of tools called DSPM, Data Security Posture Management, which is really focused around data estate and what sensitive data do you have and what exposure do you have, what lateral paths can people take to get into your data estate and data tools and data repositories. Leverage all of these and make sure that you're putting eyes on glass, whether that's somebody within your organization, which we'll talk about here in just a second, or whether you outsource that to like an MSSP to be that 24/7 eyes on glass for you. Just make sure that somebody is looking at that because the worst thing that can happen is that there's an alert, nobody sees it, it goes unaddressed, and then you have some sort of security incident. Which goes into a point that I want to bring up on this slide. that's sort of encompassed by a lot of things, is invest in some sort of single pane of glass. Sean mentioned a lot earlier about hybrid cloud. We're not saying that you need to move everything into a hyperscaler. Actually, the vast majority of my clients don't move everything into a hyperscaler. They're still going to maintain some sort of infrastructure on premises. They're going to maintain that hybrid cloud presence. Have some sort of unified dashboard for security and for operations, whether that is something that's built into one of the cloud providers or that's a third-party service, whether it's a combination of the two. Make sure that you're unifying where you can in terms of this visibility and a lot of these tools, because they can be used across multiple different environments. So don't just look at a tool because it can monitor AWS. Don't just look at a tool because it can monitor VMware. Make sure you're looking at tools that can give you that holistic view of the environment and incorporate all of these security and compliance tools and tasks therein. And then once again, the last piece is the people side. Every single organization I've talked to, their staff, sometimes they want to change, but a lot of times they, like coming in, doing the same thing. They know their data center, they know their servers, maybe they have pet names for them. I don't know. People are like that sometimes, but at the end of the day, they're really resistant to change. They don't want to look at cloud native solutions because we've always done it this way and we know we can do it this way, without realizing that maybe there is a better mousetrap. Maybe there is a better way that you can build this thing out. Maybe we can reduce your daily burden of having to replace disks and upgrade RAM and to, increase storage on your firewalls. There are ways that we can make your teams more efficient by leveraging the cloud, because those things don't have to be managed and maintained by your staff. And sometimes you do need to increase staff. Maybe you want to find somebody that has, domain specific knowledge around how to run, Fabric, or maybe you want to find somebody who can run RDS on Amazon. Sometimes you do need to hire up if you don't have the proper people to skill up as well. In addition, as you're sort of working through these changes, make sure you've got that change management process in place. I know we haven't talked a lot about ITSM in this webinar. It's not really the point behind it, but having a change management procedure is exceedingly important. Make sure that you are talking to the organization, talk to your business owners, talk to your application owners, talk to your data owners, let them know that things are moving, things are changing, that you want to make these adjustments to the way that the business operates at the end of the day, because it's going to be more efficient. But we don't want to make these changes. We don't want to make these decisions in a vacuum. Make sure that if you have a change advisory board, that you're talking about why you're making these changes and what the changes are. Make sure you've got buy-in from your leadership, because at the end of the day, if somebody gets pushback, it's probably going to go up to them or up to your board if you do have a board of directors. You want to make sure that everybody all the way up that chain has an idea and has a vision of what you want to do and why you want to do it, and the benefits that your organization is going to get as you make these changes and as you modernize your data estate. So with that, let's talk a little bit about things that you can do now. So as an organization coming out of this webinar, what are some of the first things that you should do? And number one is take advantage of trials on both Azure and AWS, as well as some other cloud-based data storage providers. There are free trials. There are forever free services. Take advantage of those. Do some free training. Do some just messing around on your own for very, very cheap if you want to. But at the end of the day, make sure that you are actually kicking the tires on these things. As Sean mentioned earlier, it's very easy to spin something up, play around with it, break it, fix it, break it again, destroy it, redeploy it, put your data out there securely, obviously, destroy it again, recreate it, fix it, etc. Look at these cloud platforms and validate if they're going to be able to do the job for you. And just because everything isn't one for one, don't take that to mean that the cloud isn't going to work for you, because there are certain situations that you are going to need to change your processes or change the way that you do things as an organization, which we'll talk about here in a little bit as well. But get used to it. Go through various trainings, as I mentioned before, look at various solutions and try to figure out which one works for you. And if you're not sure what's going to work best for you, for a shameless plug, because we do have several webinars in this series that we are planning on discussing other more domain specific areas such as Amazon or Microsoft Fabric. So please stay tuned to our Bright Talk page, stay tuned to our website, stay tuned to our LinkedIn, and join us in future webinars to talk about some of these platforms and some of the best practices and why you may want to do one over the other. You get to see our faces again, most likely, and we get a chance to talk through some of the nuances of these individual data platforms. And then finally, on the skills training side, don't just look at, looking at Azure or AWS training. Look at Python, look at DevOps and MLOps and data ops and data governance, and, start expanding your skill set. Start expanding your team's skill sets, because once again, it is going to change no matter what. As reticent as people tend to be about change, the one constant in this world, in this life, is change, and especially in IT, over the last handful of years, has been a significant amount of change as we've had the advent and the integration of artificial intelligence and machine learning into everyday life. I'm sure everybody watching this webinar has seen that, and those who aren't using it are going to fall behind. Same thing goes with skilling. So please make sure that you're going through your skills, that your teams are prepared for this cloud journey, and that they're ready to take that next step into being a cloud-first organization. And that ties a little bit into preparing the organization, which I'm going to turn it back over to Sean, talk a little bit about the organization side.
Yeah. So organizational preparation, it's all about planning and requirements. Identify those goals, figure out what your priorities are, what you want to do. Do you want to migrate everything to a brand new cloud data estate? Do you want to do it piecemeal? Do you want to have a hybrid situation? Make those decisions up front. Document your data requirements. For that data that's in scope, understand where those source systems are coming from, understand the transformations that are going to be required, understand the permissions and security points, and understand the integration that data may have with other systems. Security, same sort of thing. Make sure you understand any compliance, any company specific, any regulatory requirements that you have, and do your due diligence in that area. Have all of that documented up front before you undertake this process. It's much easier to make those changes incrementally as you get through it if you have that baseline of documentation already set up. And as we mentioned before, ROI calculation preparation. Put together an ROI calculation. There's a lot of ways to do it, a lot of ways to justify that, but a clear ROI will definitely grease the wheels for your project to be accepted. So what's next? What I like to think about here is the data migration to the cloud is really, it's your first step. It's not the end goal. Once you have that data platform established, now you can start leveraging additional tools. You can start leveraging AI. You can start leveraging machine learning. You can implement real-time analytics. You can use the low-code tooling out there to distribute data access to different organizations inside your company. And all of this will unlock future opportunities, and it will identify different places and put your organization on that fast path towards making intelligent and data-driven business decisions, which is really the goal of this whole thing. You want to be able to put yourself in a place where you can use data to make decisions that are beneficial to your company. So with that, again, this is Tom. Oh wait, we've got one more in here. There we go.
Yep. Yeah. Apparently, I got lucky to have both of the let's talk about Netrix slides. So let's talk about how we can help. Sean and I have been doing this, as we mentioned, for over 10 years, both of us. And let's talk about some of the things that Netrix can provide for those of you who are looking to move into the cloud or better take advantage of your data estate. Number one are things like a data platform jumpstart. if you just want to see what a data platform could look like with a very narrow goal, and actually get that spun up in the cloud, talk to us. We can set up a short-term engagement to actually work with your data in your environment with your specific business needs and business goals. I'm going to give you an actionable solution by the end of it. We call that our data platform jumpstart. I'm happy to talk through what that looks like with anybody. For those of you that aren't necessarily sure what you want to move or how you want to move or what solutions you want to implement in the cloud, we do have both Fabric and general cloud readiness assessments. So for these, we'll actually come into your environment, take a look at your data estate or take a look at your data center in general, and give you an idea of what moving to the cloud could look like. Whether Fabric does make sense or moving into another cloud-based solution makes more sense. For those of you that are already in the cloud, we can do well-architected reviews to make sure that the environment is ready and slated to host more data and to bring more workloads into the cloud. That's focused on the 5/6 pillars of the well-architected framework. And we actually come in and, once again, take an assessment of your environment and give you gaps and show you where you have some deficiencies and where you can shore things up, and make sure that as you do want to expand your cloud usage for data and for apps and for other services, that you're not going to run into any issues going forward. For those of you that are adopting AI, we also have a virtual AI architect. So this is a person who is dedicated to the organization for a certain number of hours per month that can help you in your AI journey, whether that's establishing governance, whether that is educating on new models, whether that is having discussions on prompt engineering, whether that's driving adoption in the organization, especially for those of you who may be paying for things like Copilot licenses and not seeing the ROI on them. As Sean keeps talking about, ROI is important. We can bring this person in to help learn your organization and then help drive AI in your company specifically. And then obviously we have a whole bevy of custom solutions that one of us, probably Sean, because he's smarter at this than I am, can come in and talk to you about and design something that's really custom tailor-made to your organization. So please reach out to us if you do have any questions or if you need anything. We are running a little short on time, so we are not going to take questions as a part of this webinar. But if any of those previous offerings or any questions specifically about this topic or any other topic, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information, our LinkedIn's are both here on this slide. If you have an account executive with metrics, feel free to reach out and coordinate through your account executive a meeting with us as well. If you're not fortunate enough to be one of our clients, once again, please feel free to reach out to us directly, and we will be happy to schedule a meeting and dive deep into any of these topics and any of these slides. So with that, that is all the content we have for today. I do want to thank everybody who was able to join us and everybody who is watching this later. And with that, I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. So
Thanks,
thank you.
everyone.